"I can't live without a man," said the Zulu girl. The lumberjack let her stay. The first snow had come heavy that year, burying the timber road before the men could finish hauling the last logs downriver. The sound of the sleds had faded days ago, swallowed by drifts and wind. In the silence that followed, the camp seemed to shrink into itself. A handful of cabins, blackened by smoke, pressed tight against the edge of the frozen pines. Inside, fire cracked slow in the stoves, and the smell of wet wool and pine tar hung in the air. They called him Jacob. A tall man, shoulders bent from years of lifting logs, his beard gone grey before its time. He worked without talking, and when the others sang or cursed, he kept his silence like a man protecting something fragile. The cold had taught him restraint. One night, long after the supper bell had gone quiet, he heard footsteps crunching through the yard. Not the pace of a man, lighter, uncertain. He rose, pulled on his coat, and stepped out into the white glare of the moon. At the far edge of the yard, beside the half-buried sled, a figure stood in the snow. She was thin, wrapped in a blanket too small to cover her shoulders. Her face, dark and hollow with cold, lifted when he called out. Her eyes were wide, the whites catching the light like porcelain. "Who's there?" he said. She hesitated. "I've walked far," she said softly. "From the station." Her breath came in wisps. "They said there was work." There was never work for women this deep in the timber, but Jacob didn't say that. He stepped closer, saw the shiver in her jaw, the cracked skin around her lips. She had come through more than cold. He led her inside the bunkhouse. The men were asleep, stretched across cots like felled trees. She stood near the stove, not moving, not asking. He poured her a tin of coffee. She held it in both hands as if it were a living thing. "What's your name?" he asked. "Namusa." Her voice broke on the second syllable. He frowned slightly. "Zulu?" She nodded, almost ashamed. "From Natal. There was a ship. I worked for a family. Then I came north." Jacob understood without needing the rest. There were many who had come north to disappear, men with pasts, debts, and ghosts. But he had never seen one like her here in the frost, among men who forgot gentleness the way they forgot songs from home. He found her a place to sleep in the corner near the stove. "You can stay till morning," he said. She looked up, eyes steady now. "I can work. I can wash, cook, anything." He didn't answer. The wind rattled the shutters, and somewhere beyond the yard the forest moaned, that hollow winter voice that always seemed to be warning the living. She lay down without another word. He watched her pull the blanket tight and close her eyes. He told himself it was only one night, but something in the stillness of her breathing unsettled him. When dawn came, the light was pale and reluctant. The men rose, cursing the frost in their boots. Jacob found her already awake, tending the stove, pouring hot water into the tin basin. She had tied her blanket around her waist like a skirt, her hair pinned back with a sliver of bark. The steam rose around her like morning mist. The cook, a fat man named Rourke, grumbled when he saw her. "What's this now? You bring a woman to the camp, Jacob. You gone soft?" Jacob didn't reply. Namusa met Rourke's stare without flinching. "You need food, I cook," she said. "You need clean pots, I clean." The men laughed. But there was no cruelty in it, only the weary surprise of men who had forgotten what a woman's voice sounded like. By evening the laughter had changed. The food was better, the dishes clean, and even Rourke stopped muttering. When she sang quietly over the wash basin, a low hum that might have been prayer or memory, the camp fell silent. Jacob watched from the doorway. The snow outside deepened, sealing them further from the world. That night she stayed again. He told himself it was because the trail was closed, that sending her away would be death. But when she smiled faintly as she poured his coffee, he felt something he had not felt in years, the old warmth that made a man remember who he had been before the cold stripped him down to muscle and will. Weeks passed. The river froze solid. Men left for other camps. Jacob and Namusa stayed. She worked beside him, mending clothes, hauling wood, never complaining. When he spoke, she listened like someone used to silence. One night, as they sat near the stove, she said quietly, "You work like you carry punishment." He looked at her, the lines of her face made soft by the glow. "Maybe I do. And who gave it to you?" "Myself," he said. She nodded slowly. "Then you can forgive yourself too." He didn't answer. The words stayed with him long after she had gone to sleep. Outside, the forest cracked under ice. and the northern lights moved like a slow fire across the sky. In that cold, something fragile began to live. The days shortened until afternoon felt like evening. Light slid off the snow early, leaving the camp in a blue half-dark where sound carried farther than sight. Axes rang in the distance, where the remaining men still worked the edge of the stand, but the bunkhouse and cook shack stayed mostly quiet. Those who had contracts elsewhere had taken them. Those who remained did so because they had nowhere else to go. Jacob belonged to the second kind. He rose before dawn, as always, moving with the stiffness of a man who didn't expect comfort from his own body. His hands had thickened over the years, cracked and scarred, yet he could still lace his boots quick and sure. Outside, the cold bit so fast it felt sharp, like teeth over his cheeks and nose. He crossed to the woodpile and began splitting before the sky even changed color. He heard the door open behind him, a soft creak and a rush of warmer air. Nomusa stepped out, blanket skirt layered now over some old wool trousers she had cut and sewn to fit. Her breath came white in the air. She wrapped her shawl tighter over her shoulders as she watched him. "You don't feel this cold?" she asked. "I feel it," he said, lifting the axe again. "Feeling it doesn't change anything." She stepped closer, boots crunching on the packed path between the cabins. "Back home, cold came only with the rain," she said. "We would laugh to see you now." He smiled faintly, a quick thing that passed over his face like a shadow. "I would like to see that," he said. She watched his arms rise and fall, the axe biting clean into the block. There was a rhythm to it, slow and relentless. He did not hurry, yet the pile grew. She bent, gathered the split logs into her arms and carried them to the lean-to. Together they moved without much speech, but something in the shared labor made the silence feel less heavy. Later, inside, she tended the pot of oats on the stove, while Rourke snored in his narrow bed, his shift not yet begun. The camp manager had cut rations when the men began leaving, saying the season was near over. Still, she stretched what little there was. Adding bits of dried apple, saved fat, anything to make it feel like more than gruel. Jacob came in with snow on his beard and shoulders. She handed him a bowl before he could ask. "You watch me," she said suddenly, not looking up from the pot. "When you think I don't see." He paused, spoon halfway to his mouth. "Do I?" "Yes," she said. "Like you are waiting for something to break." He set the bowl down slowly. "I am used to things breaking," he said. "Tools, men, seasons. And women?" she asked quietly. He did not answer right away. The stove ticked, metal expanding with heat. Outside, a gust pushed snow against the window like a hand. "Yes," he said finally. "Women too." She nodded once as if she had expected nothing else. "Where is she now?" she asked. "Gone," he said. "Long ago. She broke?" "I broke her," he said. Nomusa turned her head and looked at him. There was no accusation in her eyes, only interest and something like sad recognition. "You speak as if punishment is a coat you wear," she said. "But coats can be taken off." He finished his oats without replying, but her words lodged somewhere deep. In that place where he kept all the things he did not intend to touch, the snow grew heavier, then stopped, then came again. The forest muted, branches sagging under weight. Work slowed. The foreman, a pinched man named Elgin, rode out one morning with one of the sled teams and did not return. There was talk that he had gone back to town to negotiate the purchase of another stand. There was also talk that he had simply had enough and left the rest to rot until spring. In his absence, the camp drifted. Men went into the trees when they felt like it, coming back with loads of firewood instead of board timber. Others played cards, carving new decks when the old ones disintegrated from grease and handling. Someone built a rack to dry wet socks above the stove, turning the cook shack into a steam room that smelled of wool and feet. Through it all, Nomusa worked. She mended, scrubbed, stirred. She learned the names of tools and trees. She watched the men carefully, her gaze steady. Some of them watched her back in a way Jacob didn't like, but they kept their distance. They saw how he stood near her, how his eyes narrowed without him even knowing whenever one of them stepped too close. It was an unspoken line, and the men in that place understood lines. One evening, when the wind had fallen and the sky lay clear and hard above the treetops, a sleigh bell sounded faintly down the road. Heads lifted. Hands stilled in the middle of tasks. Jacob stepped out of the bunkhouse and squinted into the distance. A team appeared between the trees, two dun-colored horses blowing steam, their flanks crusted with frost. Behind them, a long sled rolled over the packed snow. 3 figures rode on it, hunched against the cold. One held the reins. One held a ledger. The third smoked a pipe, the glow tiny in the twilight. "Company man," someone muttered behind Jacob. "All the way out here?" another said. The sled pulled into the yard, runners screaming as they swerved to a halt. The man with the ledger, short, red-cheeked, wearing a fur hat that looked too large for his head, climbed down first. The pipe smoker followed. He was tall, narrow-shouldered, with cold eyes that took in the camp in a single sweep. "Afternoon, boys," the ledger man said. "Name's Hawley, Inspector." The pipe smoker said nothing, but the way the ledger man glanced at him made it clear who held the real power. Men gathered, pulling coats tighter. Jacob stayed back a little, Nomusa just behind his shoulder. She watched the newcomers with the stillness of someone who had learned to weigh strangers quickly. Their boots, their hands, their posture, all of it meant something. Hawley flipped open his book, licking a fingertip to turn pages. "Got notice from Mr. Elgin that the cut was nearly complete," he said. "We're here to tally, see if the company got what it paid for." "He's not been back," Rourke said from the doorway of the cook shack. "We thought you'd taken him," Hawley chuckled. "Elgin's where Elgin wants to be," he said. "I only go where the money says go." The pipe smoker's gaze slid over the men, then stopped. Jacob felt it before he saw it, the way one feels cold before the wind hits. The man's eyes had fixed on Nomusa. "What's this?" the pipe smoker said. His voice was smooth and thin, like ice over deep water. Jacob shifted slightly, just enough to stand more squarely between them. "She works here," Rourke said quickly. "Helps in the kitchen." "This isn't a kitchen," Hawley said. "It's a camp. Men's camp. Company doesn't pay for wives and hangers-on." "She's not paid by the company," Jacob said. "We share our rations." The pipe smoker took the pipe from his mouth, tapped ash into the snow. "That's so," he said. "And who gave you the right to decide who lives on company land?" Jacob met his eyes. There was a tension there, an old instinct that said this was trouble walking upright. "Nobody," he said. "She came in the snow. There was nowhere else for her to go. She's native?" Hawley asked, squinting. "Not from here," Nomusa said quietly. "From far south." The pipe smoker's eyes narrowed. "I've seen her kind in the city," he said. "They come with the missionaries, or with the gentlemen who like to collect curiosities. They clean houses and then complain when they're turned out." Nomusa's jaw tightened, but she didn't look away. "I worked," she said. "I was not a curiosity." "You're something," the pipe smoker said. "Name's Carter. I speak for this company's interests. And I'll tell you plain, the company didn't sign up to feed strays." Jacob heard the word like a slap. "She works as hard as any man here," he said. "Harder than some," Carter smiled thinly. "I don't doubt your gallantry," he said. "But it doesn't change the fact that she doesn't belong on company property. We're cutting costs. You don't cut timber, you don't eat company food." "She's not on your ledger," Jacob said. "But she's on my land," Carter replied. "And that's enough." The men shifted uneasily. They had all dealt with company men before, men who measured cords of wood and pounds of flesh in the same cold terms. They knew how little room there was for argument. "Where should I go?" Nomusa asked. Her voice was steady. "The snow is deep. The roads are long." Carter shrugged. "There's a town 10-12 miles south," he said. "They always need girls to wash and cook." "Or," he added, looking at Jacob, "you can marry her proper and take her on your land if you have any. Then she's your cost." A few of the men laughed nervously. Jacob did not. He felt a heat rise in his chest that had nothing to do with the stove. "She stays," he said quietly. Carter stared at him. "You contradict me?" he asked. "She stays," Jacob repeated. "She broke no rule when she walked here." Carter stepped closer, breath pluming in the air. Up close, Jacob could see the fine lines around his eyes, the faint softness under his chin. This was not a man of labor. This was a man used to using paper and pen as a whip. "Listen," Carter said. "Maybe out here you've forgotten how this works. The company owns the stand. It built the cabins, bought the tools, pays your wages. That means it decides who eats and who doesn't, who stays and who goes. This woman is an expense without revenue. That word mean anything to you?" "Means you see men as numbers," Jacob said. Carter's smile thinned further. "You talk big for a hired hand," he said. "What are you, foreman, now that Elgin's off on a spree?" "He's as good as any foreman I've worked under," Rourke said suddenly from the doorway. His voice trembled, but he didn't back down. We'd be dead without him 3 winters past when the river ice took the sluiceway. Carter flicked a glance at him, then back to Jacob. Loyalty, he said. That's cute. Doesn't change my orders. He turned slightly, speaking louder. I'll be clear, he said to the gathered men. If this woman is still in camp tomorrow morning, any man who shelters her will see his contract voided and his pay docked for breach. That means you walk out of here with nothing. No winter's wages. No advance. He looked at Jacob again, eyes cold. Anyone who wants to test that is welcome. He turned away, calling to Hawley about tallies and sled counts, as if the matter was settled. The men drifted back to their tasks, slower now, weighed down by more than wool. Jacob stood in the yard, snow creeping into his boots, and felt the old emptiness rise, that sense he had known before, when a decision pressed on him like a hand on the back of his neck. Nomusa stood beside him, close but not touching. I have seen this before, she said softly. Different men. Same eyes. You worked for a family? He asked. She nodded. In the city by the water. They took me in when the ship docked, said they would teach me to be civilized. I scrubbed floors until my hands bled. When I was too slow, they called me lazy. When I was too quick, they said I was greedy for praise. There was no way to be right. And then? He asked. And then a cousin came from the interior, she said. A young man full of talk. He would stand in the door and look at me like Carter looked just now. The woman of the house noticed. So she said it was my fault. She said I was making myself a temptation. She told me to leave. I had no wages, only a trunk of thin clothes and the name of a mission far north where they said there was work. He listened, the cold forgotten for a moment. I have walked through many snows to reach this place, she said. I will not walk again for a man like him. He looked at her. Her face was tired, lines of strain at the corners of her mouth, but her eyes were clear. Not pleading, not begging, simply stating something the way one might state that the sun had risen. You heard him, he said. If you stay, they will make me pay. Then I should go, she said. The words hit him harder than he expected. He saw for a moment the yard without her, the cook shack without her humming, the bunkhouse stove without her careful tending. The winter stretched out ahead like an empty road. You said once you gave yourself punishment, she added. Maybe this is part of it. To lose what makes you feel less alone. The truth of that sliced through him. He thought of another winter, another woman. A farmhouse half a continent away, fields instead of pines, a different kind of cold. He saw again the moment he turned his back to chase work and cash, telling himself he would send for her. By the time he had enough, she was gone, taken by fever and poor soil, they said. He had never forgiven himself for choosing timber over soil, wages over love. Now, in the snow-laden yard, he realized he was standing again at the same kind of turning. He took a breath, the air cutting his lungs. I won't lose you, he said. The words surprised him even as he spoke them, but once out they settled into the space between them, like something that had been waiting there. Nomusa's eyes softened, but her mouth remained firm. You cannot hold what the world wishes to scatter, she said. Maybe not, he said, but I can stand in the way. That night, after a supper eaten in strained quiet, the men drifted away in 2s and 3s to their bunks. Hawley sat at a table with his ledger, muttering numbers. Carter smoked by the stove, eyes half closed as if he owned the heat and the air. Jacob waited until the room emptied, then rose. He nodded to Nomusa. She understood and followed him outside. The night was swollen with stars, the snow reflecting their light so that the world glowed faintly, like a lantern under thin cloth. He led her to the far edge of the yard, where the timber road disappeared into the trees. His breath fogged before him, his hands bare despite the cold. If you go now, he said, you might make the town by midday tomorrow. The words tasted like ash. You might find work. Perhaps the mission will take you. Her shoulders hunched. The wind folded around her blanket, tugging at the edges. Or I may not make it at all, she said. I'm tired in my bones, Jacob. I know, he said. They stood in silence for a moment. In the distance, a wolf howled, long and lonely. At last she said, I cannot live without a man. The words came out low, steady, as if she had been holding them for days. Testing them against her tongue, he frowned. You've lived without me before, he said. I do not mean any man, she said, searching for the words. Back home, A woman lived inside the circle of her people. There were uncles, cousins, brothers, fathers. Even if she had no husband, she had men who stood when danger came. Here I am alone. Every house I go to, I am only myself. No one stands. They tell me to go, I must go. When I say I cannot live without a man, I mean I cannot live without someone who will stand. He looked at her, seeing her more clearly than he ever had. Not as a stray, not as a burden, not even as a comfort to his loneliness, but as a person who had been pushed from circle to circle, from shore to shore, until the very idea of belonging had become fragile. I have stood alone a long time, he said. So have I, she said. I am tired of it, he swallowed. The wind hissed through the trees. If you stay, he said, I'll have to stand against Carter. Against the company. They'll take my wages. Maybe they'll blacklist me. I might not work these woods again, she nodded. If you send me away, I will walk into a snow that will not care if I stand or fall, she said. Perhaps I will live. Perhaps I won't. But I will know you chose your wages instead of me. He flinched at the naked truth of it. She had stripped the decision of all its comfortable lies. Do not choose quickly, she added. Men choose quickly and call it bravery. But true bravery is choosing slowly and still saying yes. He thought of the debt he still owed in the last town, the drink he had taken to ease that guilt, the fights he had picked to feel something other than regret. He thought of the way his hands shook sometimes when he lay down at night, as if his body knew he was building a life out of running. Maybe, he thought, this was where running ended. You will stay, he said finally. Each word felt like a nail hammered into new timber. If they turn me out, we walk together. I won't let you go alone again. Something in her face loosened. Not a smile, not yet, but a softening, like ice beginning to crack in the warmth of a buried spring. You say this with your mouth, she said. You must say it with your back also. I will, he said. He led her back to the bunkhouse. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of tobacco, damp wool, and unwashed bodies. Men snored, muttered, turned in their bunks. The stove glowed dull red. He lay on his own bunk, boots beside him, coat folded under his head. She curled near the stove on her pallet, wrapped in her blanket. The distance between them was only a few steps, but it felt like a rope stretched taut over a chasm of choices. He stared at the ceiling until sleep came, thick and heavy. Morning broke late, a grey smear behind the window. Hawley and Carter sat at the table, cups of coffee in front of them. Carter's pipe lay unlit, his eyes sharp. Namusa rose and moved to the stove, as she had every morning since she came. She stoked the fire, put water on to boil, set out bowls. Her hands did not tremble. Carter watched her for a long time. Then he looked at Jacob. I see you chose, he said. Jacob met his gaze. I did, he said. Carter's lip curled faintly. Last chance, he said. Tell her to pack and go, and I forget this conversation ever happened. You work out the season. You get your pay. You walk away richer. Jacob's jaw tightened. She stays, he said. Carter leaned back in his chair. Then you're done here, he said. Pack your things by noon. You'll be off company land before sundown, or I send men to carry you. The room went still. Spoons hung in midair. Rourke's hand froze on the bread knife. You'd throw away a good man in winter, Rourke said hoarsely. For what? One more mouthful of porridge? For principle, Carter said. A camp without rules is chaos. You start making exceptions because your cook found her conscience. You end up with wives and children cluttering the place, debts climbing, men forgetting why they're here. We're not running a charity. We're cutting timber. Jacob stood slowly. The bench scraped on the floor. His heart pounded, but his voice stayed level. You're not throwing me away, he said. I'm walking. The men stared. This was the inciting moment, though none of them would call it that. It was just a choice, made in a warm room while the cold waited outside. Yet they all felt deep down that something had shifted. Jacob, one of the younger men, said, Think, where will you go? Town's full of men out of work. Snow's deep. You got no savings. I have my hands, Jacob said, though they still know how to lift. And me, Namusa said quietly. All eyes turned to her. She stood straight, ladle in hand, shawl drawn tight, not hiding. You have my hands too, she said to Jacob. They know how to scrub and sew and cook. We will not starve easily. Carter snorted. 2 beggars, he said. Fine, walk off. You'll come crawling back to some post like this before spring, if you make it that far. But you'll not work for this company again. I'll see your name blackened from here to the bay. Jacob nodded once, as if accepting terms of a trade. "Then that is what it will be," he said. He went to his bunk, rolled his blanket into a bundle shoved in his spare shirt and socks. Nomusa folded her pallet, gathered the few things she owned. A small cloth with her meager keepsakes, a wooden spoon she had carved, a scrap of blue fabric from a dress she'd worn in another life. Some of the men stood, as if to speak, then sat again. They had families waiting on their wages. They had debts. They had their own punishments to carry. Pity wrestled with fear in their eyes, and fear won, as it usually did. Only Rourke moved. He trundled into the pantry, rummaged among the sacks, and emerged with a small bundle tied in cloth. He shoved it into Jacob's hands. "Dried meat, oats, bit of salt," he muttered. "Don't say my name if anyone asks where you got it." Jacob's throat tightened. "Thank you," he said. Rourke eyed Nomusa. "You watch over him," he said gruffly. "Man like that doesn't know when he's cold until he's half frozen." "I will," she said. They stepped outside together. The cold hit them full in the face, a slap that woke every nerve. Jacob slung his bundle over his shoulder. Nomusa held hers close to her chest. Behind them, the bunkhouse door closed with a thud that sounded to Jacob like the closing of a chapter in a book he had been reading too long. They walked toward the timber road, the same one he had shown her the night before. Their boots sank into the snow, leaving a pair of tracks where there had been none. After a few steps, Jacob stopped. He turned to look back. Some of the men had come to the windows, faces pressed to the glass. One, the youngest, lifted a hand in a small, uncertain salute. Rourke stood in the doorway, apron flapping in the wind, eyes shining with something like pride and sorrow. Carter was not visible. He didn't need to be. His orders filled the spaces he left. Jacob lifted his hand in return, then turned again and walked on. Nomusa trudged beside him, breath coming hard. "This is your country," she said between breaths, "and yet you walk like an exile." "I've been an exile everywhere," he said. She nodded once. "Then we match," she said. Two exiles walking together. The forest welcomed them with the sound of branches shifting under weight. The road curved ahead, disappearing into a world of white and black, snow and bark. Each step carried them farther from the camp and deeper into whatever waited. Jacob felt fear gnaw at his belly, but under it, there was something else. A strange, unfamiliar lightness. For the first time in years, he was not walking away from something. He was walking towards someone, and though the cold would soon test that choice with teeth and hunger, in that moment, as their footprints marked the fresh snow, the decision held like a beam set straight in new-hewn timber. They walked until the sound of the camp was only a whisper behind them, and then nothing at all. The trees closed around the road, pines rising on both sides like the pillars of a narrow hall. Snow fell again, finer now, a dry dust that hissed against their coats. Jacob set the pace steady and unhurried, the way men walked when they knew distance mattered more than speed. Nomusa followed close, her steps light, her breath white. She had wrapped her shawl over her mouth to warm the air before she drew it in. By noon they stopped beside a frozen creek. Jacob knelt, scraped a hole with the back of his axe and lifted the crust of ice. Water ran dark beneath. He cupped his hand and drank, then offered her the same. "It tastes of iron," she said. He nodded. "Everything up here does, even the men." The town woke early, as if afraid of wasting what little light winter offered. By the time the first pale line of dawn touched the eastern roofs, the forge below their loft was already alive. Iron rang like a struck bell. The sound came up through the floorboards, a steady heartbeat that pulled Jacob from sleep. He lay still for a moment, feeling the weight of the blankets, the faint warmth from the small stove. Nomusa's breathing was soft beside him. Outside, a horse snorted, hooves clattering on frozen ground. Somewhere a dog barked, sharp and insistent. He sat up, joints complaining. Nomusa stirred, opening her eyes slowly. "The sound is different here," she murmured. "How?" he asked. "In the camp the trees spoke more," she said. "Here it is, men and iron." He pulled on his boots. "Both can break you," he said. But there was no bitterness in it, only an old knowledge. Downstairs the blacksmith already had the forge blazing. He was a big man, broader even than Jacob, with arms like tree trunks and a belly that spoke of steady meals. Soot darkened his face, leaving pale tracks where sweat ran. "You're up," the smith said without looking away from the glowing iron. "Good, hand me that hammer." Jacob moved without thinking, his body remembering the rhythm of work. The handle settled comfortably into his palm. He watched the red-hot length of metal, waited for the nod, then struck where the smith turned it. Sparks leaped, bright against the dim shop. "You learn fast," the smith said after a few blows. "Name's Abram. Jacob," he replied. "You already knew that," Abram grunted. "Town's small. Word moves quicker than smoke." Namusa appeared at the bottom of the ladder, shawl wrapped tight. The forge's heat reached for her like an open hand. She closed her eyes briefly, savoring it. Abram jerked his chin toward a small side table. "There's bread and fat left from last night," he said. "Tea in the pot if it hasn't gone too bitter." "Thank you," she said. He paused, hearing the cadence of her voice more clearly now. "You're not from anywhere near here," he said. "No," she replied. "I am from very far south." He eyed her, then went back to the iron. "South is south," he said. "So as long as you pull your weight, I don't care if you dropped out of the clouds." She smiled faintly and went to the table. The bread was rough but fresh. She poured tea into 2 tin cups, brought one to Jacob. His fingers brushed hers as he took it. The closeness felt new in this place, almost dangerous. Through the forge's open doorway, people began to pass. A woman with a basket, a boy dragging a sled, 2 men with shovels over their shoulders. Some glanced in, curious. Some looked away quickly, as if afraid curiosity might cost them something. It didn't take long for eyes to settle on Namusa. A woman in a dark shawl stopped outright, staring. Her lips tightened, and she crossed herself quickly before hurrying on. A man with a red beard slowed, frowned, then spat in the snow. The spit steamed for a moment before freezing. "Don't mind them," Abram said, though his jaw was set. "They'll gawk at anything new. Give it time. Do they know about the camp?" Jacob asked. "Everyone knows about the camp," Abram said. "From here to the bay. Knows the company, too. Owns half the town's debts." Jacob exchanged a glance with Namusa. "And Carter?" he asked quietly. Abram's hammer paused mid-swing. "You had dealings with him?" he asked. Jacob nodded once. Abram blew air through his nose like an irritated bull. "He comes through to tally timber and remind us who holds the leash," he said. "Smiles like a preacher, cuts like a saw." "Why?" "He turned us out," Jacob said, "for letting her stay." Abram stared at him for a long moment. The iron cooled on the anvil, darkening. Finally, he set his hammer aside and grabbed the tongs again. "You went against him for her?" he asked. "Yes," Jacob said simply. Abram snorted. "Then you're either the biggest fool I've met or the only man with a spine in 50 miles, he said. "Either way, you can swing a hammer." "That's good enough for me." Namusa watched him with a measured gaze. "And for me?" she asked. "What is good enough?" Abram met her eyes. They were almost level, she on the packed earth, he behind his anvil. "Can you scrub a forge floor, cook without wasting, and not mind men who swear more than they speak?" he asked. "Yes," she said. "I have done worse for less," he nodded. "Then we're square," he said. "You work, you eat, you keep a roof. Folks don't like it. They can find another smith to fix their runners in the dead of winter." His words held more weight than Jacob expected. In a place like this, a man who fixed metal was a man whose opinion mattered. Still, Jacob saw the way Abram's gaze flicked toward the door, as if measuring invisible lines. Even a strong man bowed under certain weights. By midday, news had spread. They felt it in the way people came to the forge with reasons that were thinner than usual. A woman brought a pot with a small dent, cradling it like an injured child. "Can you fix this?" she asked, eyes sliding past Jacob to Namusa. Abram held the pot, turning it. "This dent's older than your youngest," he said. "Why now?" She shifted. "I thought maybe, while I was here, I could ask." She hesitated, then leaned closer. "Is it true?" she whispered. "You've got one of them in your loft?" "One of what?" Abram asked, voice flat. She flicked a nervous glance at Namusa, then back to him. "Colored," she muttered. "Ship girl. I heard the trader's boy say he saw her." Abram set the pot down harder than he needed to. "Her name's Namusa," he said. "She's working for her keep." "That's all that needs saying." The woman blinked, taken aback by his tone. "I didn't mean offense," she said quickly. "It's just folk talk. You know." "Let them," Abram said. "Talking keeps them from freezing their tongues." He quoted a price for the pot, higher than it deserved. She paid without arguing, more eager to leave than to haggle. As the afternoon wore on, more came. A man with a loose shoe, A boy with a broken knife, a trapper whose sled runner had cracked. They all found excuses to linger, eyes sliding to the dark-skinned woman who moved around the edges of the forge, sweeping, wiping, carrying water. Namusa felt their looks like nettles on skin. She kept her movements calm, shoulders straight. When someone stared too long, she met their gaze briefly, not challenging, not lowering her eyes either. It unsettled them. People expecting shame rarely knew what to do with dignity. In the evening, when the sky outside turned from grey to a deeper, bruised blue, Abram banked the forge and hung up his apron. "That's enough," he said. "Tomorrow we start on the big sleds." Jacob wiped sweat from his neck, muscles pleasantly sore. He had always liked the feel of earned fatigue. It kept dark thoughts at bay. Namusa cleaned the table, stacking cups. "Do they matter?" she asked quietly, nodding toward the street. "Who?" Jacob asked. "The ones who look at me like I am a stain," she said. He leaned against the workbench, thinking. "They matter to themselves," he said. "As for us, they matter if they can harm us." She considered that. Back home, the elders used to say, "A man's eye can strike as hard as his hand," she said. "They're wrong here," Jacob said. "Here it's paper that strikes hardest. Deeds, contracts, tallies. The eyes are just warning signs." She smiled faintly. "You speak like a man who has been struck by both," she said. He nodded. "I have." Up in the loft they shared a simple meal. Abram, it seemed, was a man who understood the value of full bellies. He'd left them a pot of boiled potatoes and a slab of salted pork. Namusa sliced the meat thin, careful to stretch it. As they ate, voices drifted up from outside. Laughter. Then, sharper, a shout. Jacob set his tin plate aside and moved to the small window. Frost traced delicate veins across the glass. He scraped a clear spot with his thumb. On the street, a knot of men stood near the forge door, breath smoking, hats pulled low. He recognized the red-bearded man from earlier, along with two others built like men who spent more time in chairs than on sleds. "What is it?" Namusa asked, coming to stand beside him. "Trouble circling," he said. "We knew it would," she replied. They watched as Abram stepped out, door frame making his bulk seem larger. His arms were crossed, apron still on. "Evening," Abram said. "Forge is closed." "Didn't come about iron," the red-bearded man said. "Came about that." He jerked his thumb upward, roughly toward where Jacob and Namusa stood. Abram's jaw tightened. "Her name is Namusa," he said. "If you've got questions, ask them plain." The red-bearded man spat in the snow again. "Plain enough. Folk don't like the idea of her under your roof," he said. "My wife saw her. Came home shaking like she'd met the devil. My boy asked if she was a slave. You know what that does to children? Fills their heads with things." Abram snorted. "Children's heads are empty cups. They'll fill with whatever you pour," he said. "Pour better," the man flushed. His companions shifted, emboldened. "It ain't right," one of them said. "You taking in strays like that. Next thing, there'll be more. They say they're just passing through, but they settle. Then we're the strangers in our own town." Jacob felt Namusa's gaze on his profile. He didn't move away from the window. "We're not planning to settle," he murmured, more to himself than to her. "Does that matter?" she asked softly. "They see my skin, not my plans." Down below, Abram folded his arms more tightly. "You boys worry about what's under my roof when your own roofs don't leak," he said. "You forget how this town started? With men like me opening doors in winter when others wouldn't." "We're not saying you're a bad man, Abram," the red-bearded one said. "But there's church to think of. There's order. Preacher says—" Abram cut him off with a raised hand. "Preacher says a lot," he said. "Tell him if he wants to chat about who I let in my loft, he can come himself. Until then, I take in who I please." "You're putting yourself against the town," the man warned. "I'm putting myself against fools," Abram replied. "Town can decide which side it's on." The men muttered, not ready for a direct fight, not in this cold. They backed away slowly, grumbling, boots crunching on ice. One glanced up at the loft window. Jacob stepped back instinctively, heart beating harder. "They will come again," Namusa said. "Yes," Jacob said. She reached out, touched his arm. "We have seen worse than words at a door," she said. "Do not fear them." "I don't fear them," he said. "I fear what they can turn into." She nodded slowly. "Fear is only useful if it sharpens you," she said. "Not if it freezes you." That night sleep came in fits. Jacob dreamed of the camp, of Carter's thin mouth, of trees cracking under ice. He woke more than once to the sound of the wind. thinking it was footsteps. On the third day, the preacher came. He arrived mid-morning, wrapped in a long black coat, hat dusted with snow. He was not old, but his hairline had receded already, and his eyes had that bright, burning look Jacob recognized from men who believed themselves chosen to correct the world. He did not step into the forge. Instead, he stood just outside, hands clasped behind his back, and waited. Abram pretended not to see him for a full minute, finishing the piece he was shaping, but the tension in his shoulders betrayed him. At last, Abram set down his tools and went to the doorway. "Reverend Hale," he said. "You look cold." Hale smiled thinly. "The Lord provides the warmth I need," he said. "Lord ought to try a forge," Abram muttered. Hale's gaze flicked past him, into the dim interior. It found Jacob first, then Nomusa sweeping in the corner. His eyes lingered there. "I hear you've taken in travelers," Hale said. Abram leaned one shoulder against the frame, filling most of the opening. "This town was built by travelers," he said. "Unless I misremember." "Of a particular sort," Hale replied. "Men who would build, settle, raise families in God's sight. Not all who come through our doors share that purpose." Jacob felt Nomusa still beside him. Broom halted mid-sweep. Her face was unreadable, like a carved mask. Abram shrugged. "These two look like they're trying to build something," he said. "Roof work day by honest day." Hale smiled again, but it didn't reach his eyes. "The man, perhaps," he said. "He appears capable of labor. But the woman," he tilted his head, "her presence has disturbed some of the flock. They speak of unease. Children have questions I would rather not answer." "Then answer them," Abram said. "That's what they pay you for, isn't it?" "There are questions that lead souls astray," Hale replied. "The Lord set boundaries for a reason. This woman, she is not of our people, not of our ways. The Lord divided the nations at Babel. He did so with purpose." Jacob stepped closer, unable to hold back. "The Lord might have divided tongues," he said, "but it was men who decided some tongues must be silenced." Hale's eyes finally settled on him. "You're Jacob," he said. "From the camp." "Yes," Jacob said. "I heard you defied the company man," Hale said. "Chose this woman over your contracted duty." "I chose a human being over a tally sheet," Jacob replied. Hale sighed softly, as if already weary of the conversation. "You speak with the arrogance of one who thinks his individual conscience outweighs the needs of community," he said. "This town survives by order, by everyone knowing their place. When lines blur, decay follows. What place is mine?" Nomusa asked quietly from the corner. Her voice cut through the forge like a new sound. Hale turned his head slowly, as if only just acknowledging her as more than an object in the room. "That is precisely the question," he said. "You were not born to this land, not raised in our ways. You come from elsewhere. You bring with you customs, ideas, temptations that could unsettle hearts not yet firm in the Lord's teaching. Your very presence stirs unrest. I have already had 3 women at my door, distressed. They speak of their husbands' eyes." Jacob's jaw clenched. "Their husbands' eyes are their own responsibility," he said. "Not hers." Hale's gaze sharpened. "We are all responsible for the stumbling of our brothers," he explained gently, as if to a child. "Scripture is clear. A woman must be modest, must not draw attention, must not—" Nomusa took a step forward, broom still in hand. "I dress in what I have," she said. "I speak when spoken to, and sometimes not even then. I work. If men's hearts burn, that fire was already there. I did not bring it from the south in my small bundle." Abram coughed to hide a surprised chuckle. Hale studied her. "You speak boldly," he said. "Too boldly, some would say. A woman should be meek." "In my land," she said, "meekness for a woman often meant dying quietly when men decided her fate. I have already been turned out from one house, walked through snow alone. I have been meek enough for a lifetime." Silence stretched. The forge's coals glowed, settling with soft sighs. Hale shifted tactics. "No one is saying you must be cast out into the wilderness," he said, spreading his hands. "There are missions farther south that take in your sort. Places where women are put to work, taught proper ways, kept among their own. It would be more fitting. Safer for everyone. For you," she said. "Safer for your peace." "For the town's spiritual health," he corrected. Abram shook his head. "She's safer under my roof than in some mission run by men who think charity means ownership," he said. Hale's eyes chilled. "Charity without structure is chaos," he said. "And I must answer to God for every soul here. That includes yours, Abram. Abram straightened, no longer leaning. You worry about their souls, he said. I'll worry about their bodies not freezing. Hale looked from one to the other, then back at Jacob. You're at the center of this, whether you admit it or not, he said. The company speaks ill of you. Men listen. Now I find this town bending around your decision, contorting itself to make room for what doesn't belong. That cannot stand. Jacob stepped fully into the open, the cold from outside meeting the forge's heat at his chest. Then perhaps we won't stand in it, he said. We'll move on when the thaw comes. We didn't come to stay forever. Hale's gaze flickered, calculating. If you truly mean that, he said slowly, then I will ask the town to exercise patience, but I will also ask you to keep discretion. He glanced at the loft ladder. No scandal. No open flouting of decency. Jacob felt the implication like a shove. His cheeks burned, half with cold, half with anger. She sleeps near the stove, he said tightly. I sleep near the stove. We share warmth, work, not sin. Hale gave a small, superior smile. The line between the two is thinner than most men admit, he said. Especially in the dark months. Namusa's eyes flashed, but she held her tongue. This was not a fight she could win with words, not now. Hale folded his hands. I will be watching, he said softly. The Lord sees. Even if the snow hides footprints, nothing is hidden from him. Then he has seen you turn a woman away from warmth, Namusa said under her breath. Hale either did not hear or pretended not to. He tipped his hat and walked away, boots leaving neat prints in the packed snow. Abram exhaled slowly, shoulders dropping. Well, he said, that's a hornet's nest poked. Jacob scrubbed a hand over his face. Have I made things worse for you? He asked. Abram shrugged. I'm a blacksmith, he said. Folk will grumble, but when their plows break and their cart axles crack, they'll come. Even Reverend Hale's stove has bolts I made. He looked at them both. You too, though. You'll have to walk a straighter line than most. Any slip, real or imagined, they'll use it. Namusa leaned her broom against the wall. Where I come from, she said, people watched too. They said a woman alone was trouble waiting to happen. They watched and whispered until trouble found her. She met Jacob's eyes. We must be our own circle now. Our own circle, he repeated. That afternoon they worked with a new awareness, every movement under unseen eyes. When Jacob lifted heavy stock, he felt the weight of the town's suspicion on top of it. When Namusa stepped out to fetch water from the pump down the street, she felt gazes slide over her like rough hands. A boy by the well stared openly. You really from Africa? He asked as she filled her bucket. Yes, she said. Do you have lions? He demanded. She smiled despite herself. They have themselves, she said. They do not belong to me. He laughed loudly and ran off, shouting to his friends about lions. Behind him, a woman hissed his name and ushered him away, casting a quick sign of the cross in Namusa's direction. By evening, the first crack appeared in their fragile shelter. Abram came up the ladder holding his hat in both hands, an odd gesture for such a large man. He stood just inside the loft, not quite entering. There's talk, he said without preamble. More than I expected this quick. Hale's stirring it, but he's not alone. The trader, the innkeeper, that red-bearded fool, they're all circling like crows. Jacob sat up from where he had been mending his glove. Has anyone refused you work? He asked. Abram snorted. Not yet, he said, but they're pinching coins harder. And I heard something that makes my teeth ache. He looked at Namusa. Carter's coming through, he said. She went still. Jacob's hand clenched around the awl. When? He asked. Next supply run, Abram said. 2 days, maybe 3. He does his circuit, Camp Town, Tallybook's church, or the other way around. Either way, he has a long memory for defiance. Jacob felt the air thin around him. It was one thing to face village gossip, another to face a man who could close doors in every camp and every yard for miles. Namusa moved closer, her presence steady. We knew we were not done with him, she said. Men like that don't like loose ends. Abram sat on a crate, making the loft seem smaller. You have choices, he said. You could slip away before he gets here. Take the back road east toward the river settlements. Different company there, different men. Carter's reach is long, but not infinite. Jacob imagined it. Leaving again, new roads, new faces, the same cold. They'd only just warmed their feet at this hearth. And if we stay? He asked. Abram scratched at his beard. Then Carter will find you, he said. He'll press the preacher, the trader, and anyone else he needs to to make life here harder. He can't order you off like at the camp, but he can squeeze until you feel it in your belly. Nomusa's gaze moved between them. Would he try to take me? She asked calmly. As property? Abram opened his mouth, closed it, then opened it again. He'd be careful how he did it, he said. But I've seen his kind buy women's contracts. Call it service, call it putting them to work. Same as chains, just on paper. Jacob stood, the loft seeming to tilt under his feet. He'll not buy you, he said. His voice came out low and dangerous. Nomusa's eyes held his. Then we must be ready to stand when he comes, she said. Running only makes a man like that feel taller. Abram looked between them and grimaced. I had a feeling that's what you'd say, he muttered. Fools, the both of you. Brave fools, he sighed. Then we'll stand. This forge has seen worse winters than this. It can weather one more storm. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the shutters. The snow whispered against the roof like someone speaking through a closed door. In that cramped loft above the forge, with nothing but a thin layer of wood between them and a town beginning to harden against them, Jacob felt the shape of the coming days settle in his bones. It would not be hunger or cold that tested them next. It would be pride, fear, and the kind of courage that doesn't roar, but simply refuses to move when pushed. They ate a little of Rourke's meat, chewing in silence. The forest creaked around them, the sound of trunks adjusting under the cold and old music. When they walked again, Jacob found himself listening for her breath behind him. It kept him steady. The wind had teeth, and the road bent north into deeper woods where the snow lay untouched. As dusk came, they found an old line camp, half collapsed, its roof sagging under snow. Jacob cleared the doorway with his shoulder. Inside was dark and smelled of old smoke. He set a fire in the stone hearth, the flame slow to catch. When it did, orange light filled the room, showing a bunk, a broken chair, a few rusted tools. Nomusa sat near the fire, rubbing her hands. This place has ghosts, she said quietly. He looked up sharply, then saw her faint smile. Not real ones, she said. Only memory, he nodded. Every camp has them. Men work, die, leave their breath in the walls. They cooked oats with melted snow, the mixture thin but warm. Afterward, he spread his blanket for her on the bunk, took the floor himself. She watched him for a long time. Do you treat me like a wife, she said. He poked at the fire. I treat you like someone who deserves to sleep warm, she smiled slightly. That is more than most wives get, he didn't answer. The wind pressed against the door, and in that sound there was both threat and protection. Morning came pale. Jacob rose early, added wood to the fire, then stepped outside. The world was washed clean, no tracks, no sound, but the small whisper of snow settling. Nomusa joined him, shawl pulled tight. Where will we go? She asked. He thought for a moment. There's a town south beyond the ridge. I've worked there before. Maybe we find a shed, maybe a man who needs hands. And if not, then we keep moving until the thaw, she nodded. I have walked before. They set out. The day lengthened, but the sky stayed the same dull pewter. By afternoon, the first signs of the ridge appeared, a rise in the land, boulders half buried in snow. They climbed slowly. At the top, the forest opened to a view of white hills and a thin thread of smoke far away. Town, Jacob said. Nomusa stared at it, eyes shining with both relief and fear. Do they welcome strangers? He hesitated. They tolerate them. That was enough. They descended as light faded. The snow crusted harder here, easier to walk. By the time they reached the first outbuilding, a shed for tools and sleds, the lamps of the town were visible, flickering dots behind sheets of frost. Jacob knocked on the nearest door. It opened after a long pause. A woman peered out, face lean, hair tied back. What do you want? She asked. Work, Jacob said. A place to sleep. Her eyes moved to Nomusa and narrowed. The inn's full, she said. Try the blacksmith's, he takes in drifters. The door shut. Nomusa exhaled slowly. Tolerate, she murmured. They walked on. The main street was a narrow ribbon of trampled snow between buildings of rough timber. Smoke rose from chimneys, carrying the smell of coal and pine. Dogs barked from behind fences. Faces appeared briefly in windows, then vanished. At the end of the street stood a forge, light pouring from its open door. A man worked the bellows, sparks flying in bursts of gold. Jacob stepped into the glow. The blacksmith looked up. Oh, you're not from here, he said. No, Jacob said. Name's Jacob. Worked for the company up north. We're looking for shelter. The man wiped sweat from his brow with a blackened arm. I could use a hand with the sled runners, he said. Winter breaks them faster than I can fix. He looked at Nomusa, then back at Jacob. And her? She can cook, so anything, Jacob said. The man grunted. Fine, you both work, you both eat. But don't bring trouble, Jacob nodded. We won't. The blacksmith led them to a loft above the forge, small but dry. Straw, a stove, a single window glazed with ice. Nomusa ran her hand along the rough boards. It is enough, she said. That night they lay near the stove, firelight dancing on the ceiling. Jacob stared at the glow and thought of the camp behind them, of Carter's face, of the men's silence. He wondered what stories were already being told about them. Nomusa spoke softly. Do you ever think of home? He turned his head. This was never home. I mean before, she said. Before all of this, he hesitated. There was a farm once, a woman. She died. I'm sorry, she said. So am I. She reached out, placed her hand lightly on his wrist. Then let this place be different, she said. He looked at her hand, the dark skin against his, and felt the weight of years loosen just a little. Maybe it can, he said. If you enjoyed, please like and subscribe and comment which country you're watching from.